You are nothing. You have always been nothing. And I will not allow nothing to taint this pack any longer." The words cut through the night air like silver blades, and Alara felt each one pierce what little remained of her dignity. Her half-brother stood on the ceremonial platform, his newly acquired alpha aura radiating outward in waves that made the weaker wolves step back instinctively. But Alara did not step back. She could not. The guards held her arms in iron grips, forcing her to stand. Before the entire pack, before the visiting dignitaries from neighboring territories, before everyone who had ever looked at her with pity or contempt, or that particular mix of both that she had come to recognize as her permanent reflection in their eyes. The festival of the full moon was supposed to be a celebration. Hundreds of wolves from across the region had gathered in the clearing, their finest clothes gleaming under lantern light, their wolves content and proud beneath their skin. Alara had known something was wrong the moment Marcus had called her name, summoning her to the platform with a voice that dripped false authority. He had been alpha for exactly 3 weeks. 3 weeks since their father had died, since the pack bonds had shifted and reformed around Marcus like water finding a new container. 3 weeks of watching him erase every trace of the man who had at least tried to protect her, even if he had failed more often than he succeeded. This Omega has no wolf. She has no strength. She contributes nothing to our pack except weakness and shame. Marcus gestured toward her as if she were evidence in a trial. And perhaps she was. Perhaps she had always been on trial, and this was simply the verdict finally being delivered. Our father, may the moon bless his rest, allowed sentiment to cloud his judgment. He kept her here out of obligation to her dead mother. But I will not make the same mistake. Strength is what builds a pack. Power is what keeps us safe. And she has neither. Alara wanted to speak. She wanted to scream that she had tried, that she had spent every full moon since she turned 13, waiting for her wolf to emerge, that she had followed every ritual and drunk every bitter tea the pack healers had given her, that she had done everything except the one thing that actually mattered, which was simply be born different than what she was. But her throat had closed around the words, and even if it had not, what would she say? Everything. Marcus claimed was true. She had no wolf. She could not shift. She could not contribute to hunts or patrols or any of the things that gave a wolf value in the eyes of the pack. There are protocols for this, someone called from the crowd. Alara recognized the voice. Vera, one of the elder females, who had always treated her with a sort of resigned tolerance. Banishment requires approval from the Council of Elders. You cannot simply cast out pack members because you wish it. Marcus smiled, and there was nothing warm in the expression. I have consulted the council. The vote was unanimous. An Omega without a wolf is not truly pack. She is a human living among wolves, and we are not obligated to shelter humans who cannot contribute. He pulled a scroll from his jacket, unfurling it with theatrical precision. The banishment is legal, sanctioned, and effective immediately. The clearing fell silent, except for the crackle of the ceremonial fires. Alara felt the pack bonds, already tenuous. Things that had never quite settled properly around her began to fray and snap. It felt like losing pieces of herself she had not realized were still attached, like watching threads pull free from fabric until only holes remained. Some wolves looked away. Others watched with expressions ranging from satisfaction to discomfort, to carefully maintained neutrality. No one spoke in her defense. Not one voice rose to question or challenge or even ask for mercy. Take her to the northern border, Marcus commanded, and the guards yanked her forward, dragging her off the platform and toward the forest path that led away from everything she had ever known. The crowd parted, creating a corridor of bodies and judging eyes. Alara tried to walk with her head up, tried to maintain some scrap of dignity, but halfway through the gauntlet, her knees buckled, and the guards simply dragged her, her feet scraping against dirt and grass. Her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall where anyone could see them. The northern border was 2 miles from the pack center, 2 miles of darkening forest and increasingly rough terrain. The guards did not speak to her. They did not need to. Their grip on her arms said everything about what she was now, which was nothing, exactly as Marcus had declared. When they finally reached the boundary markers, ancient stones carved with pack symbols and warnings, they shoved her forward with enough force that she fell to her hands and knees in the dirt. "Cross the line," one of them said. His name was Jace. She had known him since they were children. He used to share his lunch with her when the other kids excluded her from their games. Now his voice held nothing but cold efficiency. "Once you cross, you are no longer under pack protection. No longer pack at all. The wildlands do not care about omegas or humans or whatever you are. Most rogues do not last 3 days out there." Alara pushed herself to her feet, dirt embedded in her palms, her dress torn at the hem from being dragged through the forest. Beyond the boundary stones, the trees grew thicker, darker, their branches tangled overhead like clawed fingers reaching for the moon. She had heard the stories. Everyone had. Rogues who lost their packs or were banished rarely survived long. The wildlands were home to things worse than lone wolves. Feral shifters who had lost their human minds. Predators both natural and supernatural. And winter was coming. Already the nights carried the bite of frost, and she had nothing except the thin ceremonial dress she wore and the shoes that were already falling apart. "Go," the other guard said, and this one she did not recognize, which somehow made it worse. "Or we drag you across and leave you unconscious. Your choice." She took a step toward the boundary, then another. The pack bonds, already mostly severed, snapped completely as her foot crossed the line, and the sensation was so viscerally painful that she gasped, doubling over, as if she had been punched in the chest. For a moment, she could not breathe, could not think, could only feel the absence where something vital had once existed, however tenuously. Behind her, she heard the guards turn to leave, their duty completed, their hands washed of whatever happened next. Alara straightened slowly, forcing air into her lungs, forcing her legs to stop shaking. She would not die here. She would not give Marcus or anyone else the satisfaction of her body being found 3 days from now, frozen or torn apart, or simply surrendered to despair. She took another step into the wildlands, then another, putting distance between herself and the border, between herself and the pack that had never truly wanted her. She had gone perhaps 100 yards when she heard it. Footsteps, multiple sets, moving fast through the underbrush with the kind of coordination that spoke of trained hunters, not random rogues. Alara froze, her heart suddenly hammering against her ribs. She had no wolf to warn her, no heightened senses to tell her what was coming. But she did not need them. The smell of unfamiliar wolves, strong and purposeful, reached her even with her merely human nose. They emerged from the trees in a loose semicircle, cutting off any retreat back toward the border. 5 of them, all male, all radiating the kind of casual dominance that came from never having been seriously challenged. They wore dark clothing, practical and well-made, and the way they moved spoke of military training or something close to it. The one in the center, slightly ahead of the others, had silver eyes that caught the moonlight and threw it back like mirrors. "Well," he said, his voice carrying an accent Alara could not quite place. Something from the Eastern Territories, perhaps. "What do we have here?" A little omega, fresh from banishment by the smell of it, wandering into the wildlands all alone. He tilted his head, studying her the way a cat might study a mouse. "That was quite the spectacle back there. Your alpha has no subtlety. We could hear the banishment from a mile away." Alara's mouth went dry. These were not rogues. Rogues did not travel in organized packs, did not speak with educated accents, did not watch her with the calculating intelligence she saw in their eyes. "Who are you?" She managed to keep her voice steady, which felt like a minor miracle, given that her entire body wanted to collapse or run or both. Wrong question, little Omega. The silver-eyed wolf took a step closer. The right question is, what are we going to do with you? You see, we have been tracking something, following a scent that appeared 3 months ago and then vanished just as quickly. And now here you are, crossing into our path at exactly the right moment, carrying the faintest trace of something very, very interesting. He inhaled deeply, deliberately. Something old. Something that should not exist in a packless Omega with no wolf. Terror spiked through. Her, cold and sharp. She took a step back, then another. But there was nowhere to go. The other wolves had spread out, blocking every direction except deeper into the wildlands, which would only delay the inevitable. I do not know what you are talking about. I am nothing. I have nothing. Just let me go. Oh, we will let you go, the silver-eyed wolf said, and his smile was all teeth. We will let you go right after we figure out why you smell like nightshade lineage when that bloodline has been extinct for 2 centuries. After we determine whether you are valuable enough to sell to the highest bidder or if we should just kill you now and save ourselves the trouble. He lunged, faster than her human eyes could track, and Alara did the only thing she could do. She screamed. It was not a dignified sound or a strategic choice. It was pure animal panic, the kind of scream that came from somewhere primal and desperate, and she did not expect it to accomplish anything except perhaps give her attackers a moment of satisfaction before they did whatever they planned to do. But the silver-eyed wolf stopped, mid-lunge, mid-attack. He simply froze as if invisible hands had grabbed him and held him in place. His eyes went wide, not with fear, but with something that looked almost like recognition, or perhaps realization. The other wolves stopped too, their bodies going rigid, their heads turning in unison towards something behind Alara, something she could not see, but could suddenly feel, like a change in air pressure before a storm. She stays with me. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, deep and resonant, and carrying a weight that made Alara's knees want to buckle for entirely different reasons than fear. It was not loud. It did not need to be. It simply was, undeniable and absolute, the kind of voice that did not make suggestions or requests, but stated facts about reality. Alara turned, slowly, afraid of what she might see, and more afraid of not seeing it. The wolf, who stood at the edge of the clearing, was bigger than any shifter she had ever encountered, easily clearing 6.5 feet, with shoulders broad enough to block out the moon, and a presence that made the air itself seem to thicken around him. He wore black, simple and expensive, and his dark hair was pulled back from a face that could have been carved from granite for all the emotion it showed. But his eyes were molten gold, burning with an intensity that made her earlier attackers look like children playing at dominance. The silver-eyed wolf dropped immediately to one knee, head bowed, and the others followed suit so quickly it was almost comical. "Your Majesty," he breathed, and there was genuine fear in his voice now, the kind that came from knowing exactly how outmatched he was. "We did not know. We were only investigating the scent. We meant no disrespect to you or your territory. Your Majesty." The words penetrated through Alara's shock slowly, like water seeping through stone. She had never seen the King Alpha in person. Few had. He ruled the Northern Kingdom from a palace 500 miles away, appearing only for the most critical council meetings or territorial disputes. And even then, his presence was the kind of thing that became legend rather than memory. Kael Theron, the undefeated, the wolf who had taken the throne at 22 and crushed 3 separate coup attempts before his first year ended. The shifter whose power was so overwhelming that alphas who outranked him in age and experience still bent knee without question. If you are enjoying this story, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. "You are in my territory," Kael said, and his voice remained perfectly level, perfectly calm, which somehow made the threat in it more terrifying than if he had snarled. Hunting without permission. Threatening what is mine. I suggest you leave before I decide your investigation. Warrants a more permanent response. The silver-eyed wolf's head snapped up, confusion breaking through his fear. Yours? But she is just a banished Omega. She has no pack, no wolf, no... I did not ask for your assessment. Kyle took a single step forward, and all 5 wolves flinched as if he had drawn a weapon. I told you to leave. If you are still in my territory when I finish counting to 10, I will assume you have chosen death over obedience. They ran, all 5 of them scrambling too, their feet and disappearing into the forest, with the kind of speed that came from genuine terror, rather than strategic retreat. Within seconds, the clearing was empty except for Alara and the King Alpha, and the silence that followed their departure was so complete she could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Kale's eyes shifted to her, and Alara felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing, heavy and inescapable. She should bow. She should drop to her knees the way those other wolves had. But her body would not cooperate, locked in place by some combination of exhaustion and shock and the overwhelming wrongness of everything that had happened in the last hour. You are the one they banished. It was not a question. Kyle's gaze traveled over her torn dress, her dirt-stained skin, the places where the guard's fingers had left bruises on her arms. The Omega without a wolf. Alara nodded, not trusting her voice, not sure what she could possibly say to the most. Powerful shifter in the Northern Territories that would not sound pathetic or desperate or both. What is your name? Ilara. It came out as barely more than a whisper. Ilara Thorn. Was Thorn. I do not know what I am now. Something flickered in Kale's expression, too quick to identify. You are Ilara. Names do not change simply because pack bonds break. Identity does not disappear because others choose not to see it. He moved closer, and Ilara's first instinct was to back away, but something in his approach was different from the silver-eyed wolf's predatory stalk. Careful, deliberate, giving her time to adjust to his proximity. Those wolves were correct about one thing. You carry a scent that should not exist. Nightshade lineage. Do you know what that means? She shook her head mutely. The name meant nothing to her. Her mother had died when she was an infant, and her father had never spoken of her mother's family, deflecting questions with vague reassurances that some things were better left in the past. Kale studied her for a long moment, and Ilara had the unsettling sensation of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in her life. Not assessed for usefulness, or dismissed as irrelevant, but examined with genuine attention. The Nightshade bloodline was the oldest and most powerful of all wolf lineages. They were the first, according to legend, the source from which all other packs descended. They could command lesser wolves with a thought, heal from wounds that would kill normal shifters, and their mate bonds were said to be so powerful they could share thoughts and feelings across vast distances. His voice was steady, factual, like he was reciting history rather than impossible fairy tales. They also had enemies. Other packs who feared their power, human organizations who hunted supernatural creatures, political rivals who saw them as threats to their own ambitions. 200 years ago, the entire bloodline was supposedly wiped out in a single night. Every man, woman, and child killed or disappeared so completely that even their territory was erased from maps. Ilara's legs finally gave out, and she sat down hard on the ground, her mind refusing to process what he was telling her. That is impossible. I am nobody. I have no wolf at all. How could I possibly be connected to something like that? That, Kale said quietly, is an excellent question, and one I intend to answer. He extended a hand toward her, palm up, an offer, rather than a demand. You have 2 choices, Ilara Thorn. You can stay here in the wildlands, where those wolves or others like them will find you within a day or 2, and you will either be killed or sold to whoever wants to study why a wolfless omega smells like extinct royalty. Or you can come with me to the palace, where you will be safe, fed, and given answers to questions you did not even know to ask. I cannot promise the answers will be comfortable, but I can promise you will live long, enough to hear them." She stared at his hand. Strong, scarred across the knuckles, completely steady despite the insanity of what he was proposing. Going with him meant entering a world she knew nothing about, trusting a man whose reputation was built on ruthlessness and whose motivations she could not begin to guess. Staying meant almost certain death. When the choice was framed that way, it was not really a choice at all. Alara reached up and placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid, and he pulled her to her feet with effortless strength. She swayed, dizzy from shock and terror, and the pack bond severance still aching in her chest, and Kale's other hand came up to steady her, gripping her elbow with surprising gentleness. "Can you walk?" His voice had lost some of its formal distance, taking on a tone that was almost concerned, though she suspected King Alphys did not do concerned in any conventional sense. "I think so. Maybe. I am not sure." The honest answer slipped out before she could edit it into something more dignified. Kale made a sound that might have been amusement or resignation. "Honest. That is either very brave or very foolish in the royal court. But we will address that later." He released her elbow but kept hold of her hand, turning to lead her back through the forest in a direction that was neither toward her old pack nor deeper into the wildlands, but somewhere else entirely. "My car is a mile east. Try to keep up. If you cannot, tell me and I will carry you. Do not simply collapse and hope I notice. I have limited patience for unnecessary drama." Alara almost laughed at that, a slightly hysterical sound that she swallowed before it could fully emerge. Unnecessary drama. As if the entire night had not been the most dramatic experience of her life. As if being banished and attacked and claimed by a king in the span of an hour was something that happened regularly enough to develop protocols for. But she nodded and, focused on putting one foot in front of the other, on keeping pace with Kale's long strides, on not thinking about what came next. Because thinking about what came next was too overwhelming to process while also trying not to trip over roots in the dark. They walked in silence through the forest, and Alara became aware of small details she had been too terrified to notice earlier. The way other wolves, ones she could sense but not see, moved parallel to them through the trees, keeping watch or providing escort. The fact that Kale had not released her hand, maintaining the contact even though she could walk on her own now, as if the touch served some purpose beyond simple guidance. The scent of him, which her weak human nose could only barely detect, but which registered as something rich and complex, pine and smoke, and something else she had no name for. "Why did you help me?" The question escaped before she could stop it, and she immediately regretted the impulse. Kings did not explain themselves to banished omegas. But Kale did not seem offended. "Because you are more valuable than you know," he said simply. "And because I do not tolerate rogues hunting in my territory, regardless of their target. And because—" He paused, and for the first time since he had appeared, uncertainty crossed his features, subtle enough that she might have imagined it. "Because when I heard you scream, something in me responded in a way I have not experienced before. Something that insisted, you were mine to protect, mine to claim, mine to keep safe. I do not fully understand it yet, but I learned long ago to trust my instincts, and my instincts say you are important. To me, to the realm, possibly to the survival of our entire species, if the Nightshade bloodline truly runs in your veins." Alara's breath caught. She wanted to argue, to insist he was wrong, that she was nobody special, and this was all some terrible mistake. But the conviction in his voice made the denials die in her throat. And beneath the fear and confusion, something else stirred. Something that had been sleeping her entire life, curled up so deep inside that she had never known it was there. Something that heard Cale's words and recognized them as truth, even if her conscious mind could not accept it yet. They emerged from the forest onto a small paved road where a sleek black car waited, its engine already running. A driver stood beside it, a female wolf with short dark hair and a military bearing that suggested she was far more than just transportation. She opened the rear door as they approached, her expression carefully neutral as she took in Alara's disheveled appearance. "Your Majesty, I prepared the medical kit and contacted the palace. They are ready for your arrival." "Thank you, Sarah." Kyle guided Alara into the car with the same careful attention he had shown since claiming her, making sure she was settled before sliding in beside her. The interior was warm, leather seats and soft. Lighting, so far removed from the wildlands and border stones and everything that had happened tonight that it felt like stepping into a different reality entirely. Sarah closed the door and moved to the driver's seat, pulling away from the forest smoothly and accelerating onto what Alara assumed was the road to the palace. The Northern Kingdom. The seat of power for hundreds of packs. A place she had never imagined seeing, let alone entering as a guest of the king himself. "Rest if you can," Kale said, and his voice had gentled again, that almost concern creeping back in. "It is a 4-hour drive to the palace. You have been through enough tonight. Sleep will not make it better, but it will at least give your mind a break from processing everything." Alara wanted to protest that she could not possibly sleep, that her mind was racing too fast and her body was too wired with adrenaline. But the warmth of the car, the soft leather beneath her, the simple fact that she was safe for the first time since Marcus had called her name at the festival, all combined to pull her toward unconsciousness like a tide she could not fight. Her eyes drifted closed. The last thing she registered was Cale shifting slightly, his shoulder becoming a pillow as she listed sideways against him, and the rumble of his voice as he murmured something to Sarah that she could not quite hear before darkness claimed her completely. She woke to soft light and silk sheets, neither of which made any sense at all. Alara's eyes snapped open, panic flooding through her as she tried to orient herself. This was not the wildlands, not her old room in the pack house, with its narrow bed and single window that never quite closed properly. This was a bedroom that belonged in a magazine spread about luxury estates, all cream-colored walls and elegant furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows that showed a view of mountains bathed in early morning sun. Memory returned in fragments. The banishment. The attack. Cale. The drive that she had slept through, waking only vaguely when strong arms had carried her from the car, when gentle hands had helped her out of her torn dress and into soft clothing, when quiet voices had assured her she was safe and could rest. She sat up slowly, taking inventory. Someone had cleaned the dirt from her skin, bandaged the scrapes on her knees and palms, and dressed her in what appeared to be silk pajamas that probably cost more than everything she had owned in her entire life. Her hair, which had been tangled with leaves and twigs, had been brushed and braided loosely. A knock sounded on the door, soft but clear. "Miss Alara, are you awake? His Majesty asked me to check on you and bring breakfast if you were ready." Alara's voice came out rough from sleep and screaming. "Yes, I am awake. You can come in." The door opened to reveal a young woman, perhaps a few years older than Alara, with warm brown skin and kind eyes. She carried a tray that smelled like heaven, fresh bread and fruit, and something protein-rich that made Alara's stomach clench with sudden desperate hunger. "I am Mira. I will be helping you get settled while you are here. His Majesty wanted me to tell you that you are under his personal protection and are welcome to stay as long as you need. There is no rush to do anything except rest and recover. What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below." Mira set the tray on a table near the window and gestured for Alara to join her. "I know you probably have 1,000 questions, and I will answer what I can. But first you should eat. You did not have dinner last night, and the healers said your body is running on fumes. Alara moved to the table slowly, still half convinced this was a dream or hallucination brought on by hypothermia in the wildlands. But the chair was solid beneath her. The food was real and warm, and Mira's smile was genuinely friendly in a way Alara had not experienced from another pack wolf in years. She picked up a piece of bread and bit into it, and the taste was so good she nearly whimpered. "Where am I exactly?" Alara asked between bites, trying to pace herself but failing. "I mean, I know the palace, but where in the palace?" "The East Wing, 3rd floor. These are guest suites, usually reserved for visiting dignitaries or pack alphas who need to stay for extended council meetings. His Majesty had this one prepared specifically for you." Mira poured tea from a delicate pot, the scent floral and soothing. "You are probably wondering why a king would go to such trouble for someone he just met. Honestly, most of the palace staff is wondering the same thing. His Majesty does not usually take personal interest in refugees or banished wolves, but he was very clear that you are to be treated as an honored guest and that your safety is his highest priority." Alara took the tea, cradling the warm cup in her hands. "He said something about my bloodline." "Nightshade. Do you know anything about that?" Mira's expression shifted, surprise and something that might have been awe flickering across her features. "Nightshade, as in the original bloodline, the first wolves?" She sat down across from Alara, abandoning her professional demeanor for something more genuine. "That is not possible. That line died out centuries ago. Everyone knows that." "That is what he said too. But he also said I smell like them, whatever that means. And those rogues who attacked me, they mentioned the same thing before Kale showed up." Alara set down her cup, frustration and confusion bubbling up. "I do not understand any of this. I am nobody. I have no wolf. How could I possibly be connected to some legendary bloodline?" "I do not know," Mira admitted. "But if His Majesty believes it, then it is worth investigating. He does not make claims without evidence, and he certainly does not extend personal protection lightly. Whatever he sensed in you, it was enough to convince him you are valuable, important." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "You should know that this is going to cause problems. Political ones. There are people in this court who will see you as a threat or an opportunity, and sometimes those are equally dangerous. The king has enemies, wolves who smile to his face and plot behind his back. If they think he has claimed you for some strategic reason, they will try to use you against him." The bread Alara had eaten suddenly felt heavy in her stomach. "Claimed me? I thought he was just offering protection." Mira's expression turned sympathetic. "When an alpha says, 'She is mine,' in front of witnesses, especially when that alpha is the king, it is not a casual statement. It is a declaration of possession, protection, and intent." "Exactly what kind of intent?" She shrugged. "That depends on context and the individuals involved. But at minimum, it means he has put you under his direct authority, which makes you part of his household in the eyes of pack law. At maximum." She did not finish the sentence, but the implication hung in the air between them. At maximum, it could mean mate bond. The thought was so absurd, Alara almost laughed. Kings did not mate with wolfless omegas who had been banished from minor packs. They chose powerful alphas or strategically important wolves from allied territories, partnerships that strengthened kingdoms rather than creating scandal. Whatever Kale's reasons for protecting her, they could not possibly include that. "I need to see him," Alara said, pushing away from the table. "I need answers. Real ones, not speculation or theory. If he brought me here, if he claimed me in front of those rogues, then he owes me an explanation of what that actually means." Mira stood as well, something like approval in her eyes. Most wolves would be too intimidated to demand anything from His Majesty, especially after one night as his guest. But you are right. You deserve answers. She moved to a wardrobe and pulled out clothing, Simple but well-made, pants and a shirt that would actually fit Alara's smaller frame. "Get dressed. I will take you to him. He is in his study, and he left instructions that you should be brought to him as soon as you woke and ate." 10 minutes later, Alara followed Mira through corridors that seemed designed to overwhelm visitors with their grandeur. Marble floors, tapestries depicting historical battles and pack gatherings, windows that offered views of grounds so vast she could not see where they ended. They passed other wolves, servants and guards, and well-dressed individuals who could have been advisors or nobles, and every single one of them stopped to stare at Alara with expressions ranging from curiosity to calculation to poorly concealed hostility. By the time they reached the study, Alara's nerves were wound tight enough to snap. Mira knocked twice, waited for the deep voice to call, "Enter," and then pushed open the heavy wooden door to reveal a room that was somehow both intimidating and comfortable. Books lined every wall, floor to ceiling, and a massive desk dominated the space, covered in papers and maps, and what looked like official pack documents. Cale stood by one of the windows, hands clasped behind his back, looking out over the grounds with an expression of deep thought. He turned as they entered, and Alara was struck again by the sheer presence of him, the way he seemed to fill the space without even trying. In daylight, she could see details she had missed in the dark forest. The silver streaks in his dark hair, premature but somehow adding to rather than detracting from his appearance. The scar that ran along his jawline, faded but visible. The gold of his eyes, which seemed to catch and hold light in ways that defied normal biology. "Thank you, Mira. That will be all." Cale's voice was formal, dismissive in the way of someone used to being obeyed without question. Mira bowed slightly and retreated, closing the door behind her and leaving Alara alone with the King Alpha. The silence stretched between them, not quite comfortable but not hostile either. Kyle gestured to a chair near the desk. "Sit, please. We have much to discuss, and I would prefer to do it without you looking like you are preparing to run at any moment." Alara sat, mostly because her legs were shaking, and standing seemed like it would advertise that fact. "You said you would give me answers." "I did. And I will." Kyle moved to his desk, leaning against it rather than sitting behind it, reducing the physical and symbolic distance between them. "But first, I need to ask you some questions. About your mother. Her name, where she came from, anything your father might have told you about her family." Her name was Iris. Alara's memories of her mother were fragmentary at best, impressions more than concrete facts. "She died when I was 2. My father said it was a sickness, something that even shifter healing could not overcome. He never talked about her family. When I asked, he would say that some pains were too deep to revisit and change the subject." "Iris." Kyle repeated the name slowly, as if testing it. "Did she have any distinguishing marks? Unusual eye color, birthmarks, anything that set her apart physically?" Alara frowned, trying to pull up memories that were 20 years old and filtered through the limited perception of a toddler. "I think there was something about her eyes. Different colors. Maybe. One blue and one green. I am not sure if that is a real memory or something I invented because other kids said I was imagining things when I mentioned it." Kyle's expression shifted, something sharp and intense crossing his features. Heterochromia, different colored eyes. That was a marker of nightshade lineage, along with the ability to carry the bloodline even without manifesting a wolf themselves. They were the only wolves who could remain human and still pass the full power to their children. He pushed off the desk, pacing to the window and back, energy radiating off him in waves. "Your mother was Nightshade. I am certain of it now. Which means you carry that bloodline, dormant but present. The question is why your wolf never emerged." "Maybe because I do not have one," Alara said, the old familiar pain of that reality making her voice sharper than she intended. Maybe I am just broken, and no amount of legendary bloodline changes that. Or, Kale said quietly, stopping, directly in front of her chair and crouching down so they were eye level. Maybe your wolf has been sleeping, waiting for the right trigger to wake it. Nightshade wolves were not like others. They did not emerge at puberty according to a predictable schedule. They awakened when their mate bond formed, when they encountered the wolf they were destined to claim or be claimed by. It was part of what made them so powerful. Their wolves and their mates were intrinsically linked, two halves of a greater whole. Alara's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. That is impossible. I have met hundreds of wolves. If mate bonds were the trigger, it would have happened already. You had not met me. Kale's voice dropped lower, intimate in a way that made heat flush across Alara's skin. Tell me truthfully, Alara. When you touched my hand last night, when I pulled you to your feet, did you feel anything unusual? Any sensation that did not fit? Any recognition that made no logical sense? She wanted to lie, wanted to deny the jolt that had run through her at his touch, the way something deep in her chest had seemed to shift and settle, as if pieces were finally clicking into place. But he had asked for truth, and lying to a king who could probably hear her heartbeat seemed pointless. Yes, I felt something. I do not know what it was. It was the beginning of a mate bond. Kyle reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. This sensation was immediate and undeniable, warmth spreading up her arm and settling in her chest like a second heartbeat syncing with her first. I felt it too. The moment I heard your scream, before I even saw you, my wolf recognized you, claimed you, insisted you were ours to protect and keep and bind to us for the rest of our lives. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. Alara could not breathe, could not process what he was telling her. Mate, bonds did not form between kings and broken omegas. They certainly did not form after a single touch in the middle of a forest. This was impossible, illogical, completely contrary to everything she understood about how the world worked. I can see you do not believe me, Kale said, and there was something almost like amusement in his voice, though his expression remained serious. That is fair. I barely believe it myself, and I have spent my entire life trusting instincts that others question. But belief is not required for truth to exist. The bond is forming whether we acknowledge it or not. Your wolf is waking whether you accept it or not. And you are Nightshade, which makes you simultaneously the most valuable and most endangered wolf in this entire kingdom. He stood, pulling her to her feet with him, maintaining the contact between their hands. I am going to help you awaken your wolf. I am going to protect you from everyone who will want to use or destroy you once they learn what you are. And I am going to court you properly, because mate bond or not, you deserve to choose this rather than have it forced upon you by biology and circumstance. Court me? Alara's voice came out higher than normal, surprise overriding every other emotion. You are a king. You do not court banished omegas. I am a king who does what serves my kingdom and my conscience in that order. And right now, both are telling me that you are exactly where you need to be. Kyle released her hand, and the loss of contact was almost physically painful, which did more to convince her of the mate bond's reality than any words could have. You will stay here at the palace. You will be given everything you need. Training, if you want it. Education about your bloodline and what it means. Protection from those who would harm you. And time, as much as you need, to decide whether you want to accept this bond or reject it. You would let me reject it? The question slipped out before she could. Stop it. Even though you are the king? Even though you could just command me to accept? Power without consent is tyranny, Kale said simply. I did not take this throne to become a tyrant. I will not start with the woman who may be my mate. He moved back to his desk, putting physical distance between them, as if recognizing that she needed space to process. Mira will help you get settled. There are tutors who can teach you our history, trainers who can help you learn to fight if your wolf emerges, healers who can monitor your transformation if it begins. You are free to explore the palace grounds, though I recommend taking an escort until you are familiar with who can be trusted. There will be a formal dinner tonight where I will introduce you to the court. It will not be pleasant. There will be questions, challenges, wolves who see you as a threat to their own ambitions. But I will be there, and no one will harm you under my roof. Alara's mind was spinning, trying to keep up with everything he was telling her, trying to reconcile the powerful king with the man who was offering her choices instead of commands. Why are you doing this? Really? Beyond mate bonds and bloodlines and political advantages? Why did you save me? Kyle looked at her for a long moment, and something in his expression softened, the hard edges of kingship giving way to something more human. Because when I heard you scream, I felt your fear and pain as if it were my own. Because I have spent 15 years building power and security, and never once felt like anything was missing until I touched your hand and suddenly knew what had been absent all along. Because you deserve better than being thrown away by wolves too blind to see your value. He paused. And because my wolf will not rest until you are safe, protected, and bound to us so completely that no one will ever be able to take you away. That last part is perhaps more honest than is strictly advisable for a first real conversation. But you asked for truth. Heat rushed through Alara, confusing and overwhelming. She should be terrified, should be suspicious of motivations, and careful about trusting someone who held this much power over her current situation. But beneath the fear and confusion was something else, something that felt almost like hope. The idea that she might not be broken, that her wolf might just be sleeping, that the rejection and banishment might have led her exactly where she needed to be. I need time, she said finally. To think, to process, to figure out if I can even trust what I am feeling right now. Take all the time you need, Kale replied. I have waited 37 years for my mate. I can wait a bit longer for you to be ready. He returned to the papers on his desk. A clear dismissal, but not an unkind one. Mira will be outside. She will show you to the library if you want to research Nightshade history, or the training grounds if you prefer physical activity, or back to your room if you need to rest more. Tonight's dinner begins at 7. I will send someone to escort you. Ilara nodded, not trusting herself to speak further, and turned toward the door. But before she could open it, Kale's voice stopped her. Ilara, one more thing. You are not broken. You never were. You were just waiting for the right catalyst to become who you were always meant to be. Remember that when the doubts come. And they will come. Often and loudly. But they are lies your old pack taught you, not truth about who you are. She left without responding, but his words followed her into the hallway, into the rest of the day, into every moment as she explored the palace with Mira as her guide. The library was vast, filled with texts about pack history and wolf biology, and fragments about the Nightshade line that made her head spin. The training grounds were impressive, wolves sparring and running drills with military precision. Her room, when she finally returned to it, that afternoon, felt like a sanctuary, quiet and safe in ways her old room never had. Mira helped her prepare for dinner, providing a dress that was elegant without being overly formal, deep green that somehow made Alara's ordinary features look striking in the mirror. Someone had sent jewelry, delicate silver pieces that Mira assured her were appropriate for court, without being presumptuous. By the time the escort arrived, Alara felt like she was wearing a costume, playing a role she had never auditioned for. The dining hall was enormous, able to seat at least 100 wolves comfortably. Tonight it held perhaps 40, arranged at a long table with Kale at the head and an empty seat to his right that was clearly meant for Alara. Every eye turned to her as she entered, and the weight of their attention was almost crushing. She saw curiosity, suspicion, barely concealed hostility, and in a few cases, something that might have been pity. Kale stood as she approached, a gesture of respect that sent murmurs through the assembled wolves. He pulled out her chair himself, another breach of protocol that made several faces tighten with disapproval. "Lords and ladies of the court, honored alphas and representatives," he said, his voice carrying easily through the large space. "I would like to introduce Alara Thorne, who is under my personal protection and will be residing at the palace for the foreseeable future. She is to be treated with the same respect you would show any honored guest, and her safety is my direct concern. I trust I make myself clear." The message was unmistakable. Anyone who threatened Alara would answer to the king himself. But the look she was getting suggested that not everyone was deterred by that warning. A woman near the middle of the table, beautiful in a cold, perfect way, with blonde hair and blue eyes that could cut glass, leaned forward slightly. "Forgive my curiosity, Your Majesty, but what exactly qualifies Miss Thorne for such distinguished protection? Surely there must be some exceptional circumstance that would warrant your personal attention." Her voice was sugar-sweet, but the challenge underneath was clear. Kale's expression did not change, but something in the air seemed to sharpen. Lady Vivian, always so concerned with qualifications and circumstances. Miss Thorne's background is her own to share or withhold as she chooses. My decision to extend protection is not subject to committee review or popular vote. If you have concerns about my judgment, you are welcome to present them to me privately. Otherwise, I suggest you focus on your dinner. Vivian's smile did not waver, but her eyes went cold. "Of course, Your Majesty. I meant no offense, simply curiosity about our new companion." The dinner proceeded with excruciating formality, course after course of elaborate food that Alara could barely taste through her nervousness. Conversation swirled around her, court politics and territorial disputes, and economic concerns that were so far beyond her experience. She could only listen and try to follow along. Kyle engaged with his advisors and nobles with the kind of effortless authority that came from years of practice. But several times she caught him glancing at her, checking without words that she was managing. Halfway through the meal, a man across the table addressed her directly. He was older, gray at the temples, with the bearing of someone used to command. "Miss Thorne, I understand. You were recently banished from the Crescent Moon Pack. Might I ask what circumstances led to such a drastic measure?" The table went quiet, everyone suddenly very interested in her answer. Alara set down her fork carefully, meeting the man's gaze even though her instinct was to look away. "I was banished because I have no wolf. The new alpha decided that made me a burden rather than a pack member." "No wolf." The man's eyebrows rose. "And yet, His Majesty has claimed you as someone worth protecting. Interesting. Most wolves would assume a human living among shifters would have little value in pack politics. Most wolves make assumptions based on incomplete information," Kyle interjected, his voice carrying a warning edge. "And most wolves know better than to interrogate my guests at my own table, Lord Marcus. Unless you have forgotten basic courtesy along with your sense of self-preservation." Lord Marcus inclined his head, appropriately chastened, but the damage was done. Everyone now knew she was wolfless, which in their eyes would make her weak, irrelevant, possibly even contemptible. Alara felt the shift in the room's energy, the way she went from mysterious newcomer to disappointing curiosity in the space of one admission. Dinner finally ended after what felt like hours, and Alara was preparing to escape back to her room when Vivian appeared at her elbow, smile bright and eyes calculating. "Miss Thorne, might I have a word? Perhaps a brief walk in the garden? I would so love to get to know you better, given that you will be staying with us." Every instinct Alara had screamed that this was a trap, but refusing would cause its own problems. She glanced at Kyle, who was engaged in conversation with several alphas, but whose attention tracked her movement across the room. He gave a nearly imperceptible nod, permission or warning or both. "Of course," Alara said, matching Vivian's false brightness with her own. "A walk sounds lovely." The garden was beautiful, even in the evening light, carefully cultivated paths winding between flowers and trees. Vivian led her to a secluded bench, far enough from the palace that their conversation would be private. She sat gracefully, gesturing for Alara to join her. "I will be direct," Vivian said, dropping the sweet pretense. "You do not belong here. You are a wolfless omega from a minor pack, and the only reason you are being tolerated is because the king has inexplicably decided to extend his protection. But protection is not permanent, and kings change their minds when political realities shift." Alara forced herself to remain calm, to not react to the venom in Vivian's voice. "Is there a point to this conversation? Or did you bring me out here just to insult me?" "The point," Vivian continued, leaning closer, "is that I have been positioned to become the king's mate for 3 years. 3 years of careful political maneuvering, of proving my worth, of building alliances that would benefit the entire kingdom. And then you appear, a nobody with nothing to offer, and suddenly he is looking at you like you matter. I want to know why." "I do not know why," Alara said honestly. "I did not ask for any of this. I was banished and nearly killed, and he saved me. If you have a problem with his decisions, take it up with him." "Oh, I will." Vivian stood, smoothing her dress. "But I wanted to make sure you understood your position first. You are a temporary curiosity, a distraction. When the king tires of whatever novelty you represent, you will be discarded just like your old pack discarded you. And I will still be here, because I actually belong in this world. Remember that when you start believing you are special." She walked away, leaving Alara alone in the garden with her thoughts churning. Part of her wanted to run back to her room and hide. Part of her wanted to march up to Kale and demand to know if Vivian was right, if this was all temporary, if she was just a puzzle to be solved before being set aside. But a newer part, the part that was beginning to wake up deep in her chest, wanted to stay right here and prove Vivian wrong. Wanted to become everything Kale seemed to believe she could be. Wanted to stop apologizing for existing and start fighting for her place. "She is not subtle, is she?" Kale's voice came from behind her, and Alara turned to find him standing at the edge of the garden path, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. "I saw her lead you out here. Wanted to give you a chance to handle it yourself, but I was prepared to intervene if necessary. She thinks I am a temporary distraction, that you will get bored and send me away." Alara stood, facing him across the small clearing. "Is she right?" "No." The answer was immediate and absolute. Vivian has spent years trying to maneuver herself into a position she was never meant for. She is a skilled politician and a valuable member of court, but she is not my mate and never will be. You are. Whether you choose to accept that bond or not, whether your wolf awakens tomorrow or next year or never, you are mine in the ways that actually matter. And I do not discard what is mine simply because it is complicated or politically inconvenient." Something in Alara's chest loosened at his words, the knot of fear and doubt easing slightly. "I felt something during dinner, when Lord Marcus was questioning me. It was like anger, but not quite. Hotter, more visceral. And it was not just my own emotion. It felt like it was coming from somewhere else, somewhere deep inside me." Kyle's expression shifted, interest, and something like excitement flickering across his features. "Your wolf, beginning to respond to perceived threats. That is how it starts with nightshade bloodlines according to the old texts. Emotion triggers the awakening, particularly strong emotion tied to protection, or territoriality, or mate bonds." He moved closer, stopping just within arm's reach. "How do you feel now?" Alara took inventory. Her heart was racing, but not from fear. Her skin felt warm, almost feverish, and that strange double heartbeat sensation was back, as if something inside her was sinking with Kale's presence. Strange, like there is something trying to surface, something that wants out, but does not know how yet. That is normal. The first emergence is different for everyone, but it usually requires a strong catalyst. Extreme emotion, physical danger, or... He paused, and his voice dropped lower. Intimate contact with a mate. The air between them felt charged, heavy with implications and possibilities. Alara knew she should step back, should maintain distance, should not rush into anything when her entire life had been turned upside down in less than 24 hours. But that newer part of her, the part that was waking up, did not want distance. It wanted to move closer, to close the gap between them, to find out what would happen. If she stopped overthinking and started trusting the instincts that were finally beginning to make themselves heard. What kind of intimate contact? Her voice came out breathier than intended, and she saw Kale's eyes flash gold, brighter than normal, his wolf responding to hers, even though hers had not fully emerged yet. That depends on what you are comfortable with. A kiss would probably be enough. Physical contact with intent, skin on skin, the acknowledgement of the bond between us. He raised one hand slowly, palm up, offering. But only if you want it. I meant what I said about not forcing this. If you need more time, I will wait. Alara looked at his hand, strong and steady and patient. She thought about Vivian's threats, about her old pack's rejection, about every moment in her life when she had been told she was not enough. And then she thought about the way Kale had protected her without hesitation, the way he spoke to her like she mattered, the way something inside her recognized him as important long before her mind could catch up. She took his hand, lacing her fingers through his, and stepped close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. I want to try. I want to know what happens if I stop being afraid and start believing I might actually deserve this. Kale's other hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing across her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. You deserve everything, Alara Thorne. Every good thing this world has to offer. And I am going to make sure you know that, even if it takes the rest of our lives. He kissed her, slowly, carefully, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But Alara did not pull away. She leaned into it, into him, into the sensation of being wanted and chosen and claimed in ways that had nothing to do with obligation or politics. And as their lips met, as his arms wrapped around her and pulled her close, something inside her chest cracked open like an egg hatching, and power flooded through her veins like liquid fire. She gasped against his mouth, breaking the kiss, and Kyle held her as her body convulsed, as something massive and ancient and absolutely hers rose up from the depths where it had been sleeping for 23 years. Her wolf, not small or weak or broken, powerful and proud and absolutely furious at having been denied for so long. Let it happen, Kyle murmured against her hair, his arms supporting her as her legs tried to give out. Do not fight it. Your wolf wants to emerge. Let her. The transformation hurt, not in the way Alara had imagined based on other wolves' descriptions, but in the way of muscles that had never been used suddenly activating all at once. Her bones shifted, her skin rippled, and then she was falling forward onto hands that became paws, her vision sharpening, her sense of smell exploding into thousands of distinct scents, her hearing picking up sounds from miles away. She stood on 4 legs in the garden, larger than she had any right to be, her fur shimmering silver in the moonlight. Alara looked down at herself, at paws that were huge and tipped with black claws, at a body that was built for power and speed in equal measure. Her wolf. Finally, impossibly, absolutely real. Kale shifted beside her, his own transformation smooth and practiced, and his wolf was massive, dark as midnight with those same gold eyes. He was easily half again her size, radiating dominance and strength. But when he looked at her, there was nothing but approval and pride in his expression. He touched his nose to hers, a gesture of affection and recognition, and Alara felt the mate bond snap into place fully, no longer potential but absolute, binding them together with ties that would last until death and possibly beyond. They ran, through the palace grounds, into the forest beyond, racing under the moon that had witnessed the emergence of her wolf. Alara had never felt anything like this. The pure joy of movement, the freedom of her body finally working the way it was meant to, the rightness of running beside a wolf who was hers in ways that transcended logic or reason. When they finally returned to the palace hours later, shifting back to human form in the privacy of the garden, Alara was exhausted and exhilarated in equal measure. Kyle wrapped her in his jacket, since her dress had not survived the transformation, and led her back inside through private corridors that avoided the main halls. "How do you feel?" he asked as they reached her room. "Like everything just changed," Alara said honestly. "Like I am not the same person I was yesterday, or even this morning. Like I finally understand what I was missing all those years." "Your wolf is extraordinary," Kyle said, and there was genuine awe in his voice. "Silver fur is the mark of Nightshade royalty. I have only seen it in ancient paintings and descriptions. You are not just Nightshade bloodline, Alara. You are direct royal descent. Which means—" He stopped, as if considering how much to tell her at once. "Which means what?" "Which means you are not just my mate. You are potentially the queen of the original bloodline, the heir to power that predates every current pack structure. When word of this spreads, and it will spread, you will become the most valuable and most endangered wolf in existence. Every pack will either want to claim you or eliminate you. The political landscape of our entire species is about to shift." Alara's exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. Too much, too fast, too overwhelming. "I cannot think about that right now. I can barely process having a wolf at all, let alone being some kind of lost royalty." "I know." Kyle pulled her into an embrace, and Alara let herself lean against him, drawing comfort from his steady presence. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow we will start teaching you everything you need to know. How to control your wolf, how to navigate court politics, how to protect yourself from those who will see you as a threat. But tonight, just rest. You are safe here. I will make sure of it." He left her at her door with a kiss to her forehead that felt like a promise. Alara made it to her bed before her legs gave out completely, and she fell asleep still wearing Kale's jacket, surrounded by the scent of pine and smoke and the wolf who had claimed her as his own. The next weeks were a blur of training and education, and navigating the increasingly complex politics of court. Alara learned to shift at will, to control her wolf's instincts, to fight both in human and wolf form. She studied Nightshade history, discovering that her bloodline had not just been powerful, but had been the cornerstone of early pack society, establishing the laws and traditions that still governed wolf culture. She endured endless formal dinners and council meetings where various alphas tried to assess her value or test her resolve. Vivian's hostility became more overt, culminating in a public challenge during a council session, where she demanded to know by what right a newly awakened wolf deserved to sit at the king's side. Kale had shut her down with brutal efficiency, making it clear that his choice of mate was not subject to council approval, and that anyone who could not accept Alara's position was welcome to leave the court permanently. But not everyone was hostile. Mira became a genuine friend, helping Alara navigate social situations and warning her about political traps before she could stumble into them. Several younger wolves, intrigued by the story of the lost bloodline awakening, sought her out for training or conversation. And Kale, despite the weight of ruling an entire kingdom, made time for her every day, teaching her personally, courting her with a patience that made her fall for him a little more with each passing week. 2 months after her awakening, Ilara stood in the same garden where she had first transformed, watching the sun set over mountains she now thought of as home. She heard Kale approach before she saw him, her senses sharp enough now to recognize his footsteps, his heartbeat, the particular way he moved through space. "You have been out here for hours," he said, joining her on the bench. "Thinking? About everything. About how different my life is now compared to the night I was banished. About whether I would change anything if I could go back." Ilara leaned against his shoulder, comfortable with the contact in ways that still sometimes surprised her. "I think I would not. As terrible as that night was, it led me here. To you. To my wolf. To understanding who I actually am instead of who I was told I should be. Your old Alpha did me a favor then. Though I doubt he would appreciate knowing that." Kale wrapped an arm around her, pulling her closer. "I have something for you. I was waiting for the right moment, and this seems appropriate." He pulled a small box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a ring. Not ostentatious or covered in jewels, but elegant and meaningful, a silver band carved with symbols Ilara recognized from her studies as Nightshade heritage marks. This belonged to the last known queen of the Nightshade line. It was preserved in the royal archives, waiting for someone worthy to wear it again. "I am asking you to accept it. To accept me. To become my mate officially, bound by law and ceremony, and the recognition of every pack in the kingdom." Ilara's breath caught. They had been building toward this moment for weeks, the mate bond growing stronger every day, but hearing the formal proposal still made her heart race. "You are asking me to be queen. I am asking you to be my partner, my equal, my mate in all ways that matter. The title comes with that, yes, but titles are just words. What I am offering is everything I am, everything I have, everything I will ever be. You deserve a choice in this, just like you deserved a choice in accepting the bond. So I am asking, formally and officially, Ilara Thorne, last daughter of Nightshade, the wolf who awakened my heart before your own wolf emerged, will you accept this bond? Will you stand beside me, not as something I own or control, but as my partner in leading our people into whatever future awaits?" Tears blurred her vision, but they were good tears, happy tears, the kind that came from being offered something precious and knowing she was worthy to accept it. "Yes, 1,000 times yes. I choose you. I choose us. I choose this life and this future and everything that comes with it." Kale slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her rather than for a queen who had died 2 centuries ago. He kissed her, deep and claiming and full of promise, and Ilara kissed him back with equal fervor, equal certainty, equal commitment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kale rested his forehead against hers. "The formal ceremony will be in a month. Every alpha in the kingdom will attend. It will be political theater and exhausting and probably involve at least 3 attempts by rival factions to cause problems. But at the end of it, you will be my queen, and I will be your king, and no one will ever be able to question your place again." "I can handle political theater," Ilara said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. "I have handled worse. I have been broken down and built back up, rejected and claimed, lost and found. Whatever comes next, we will face it together." "Together," Kale agreed. "Always together. That is the promise of mate bonds and the foundation of everything else." They sat in the garden as night fell fully, wrapped around each other, planning a future that would have seemed impossible just weeks ago. And somewhere deep in Ilara's chest, her wolf rumbled contentment. Finally home, finally whole, finally exactly where she was meant to be. If this story touched your heart, Share it with someone who loves epic romance. Tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming? The formal mating ceremony took place on the first full moon of winter, in the grand ceremonial hall that had witnessed every major royal event for the past 300 years. Ilara wore a dress that combined modern elegance with traditional nightshade symbolism, silver and deep green, her hair woven with flowers that bloomed only under moonlight. Kyle stood at the altar in formal regalia, every inch the king, but his eyes were only for her as she walked down the aisle between rows of alphas and dignitaries from every major pack. The ceremony itself was beautiful and binding. Ancient words spoken in the old language, blood mixed and power shared. The mate bond sealed so completely that Ilara could feel Kale's heartbeat as clearly as her own. When the officiant declared them bound for life, the assembled wolves howled their approval, the sound echoing through the palace and out into the night, where packs across the kingdom joined in, acknowledging their new queen. The celebration lasted until dawn, but Ilara barely remembered most of it, focused entirely on the wolf beside her, the mate who had seen her value when everyone else saw only weakness, the king who had chosen her not despite what she was, but because of it. When they finally retreated to their private chambers, exhausted and happy, and bound together in every way that mattered, Kale pulled her close and whispered against her hair, "Thank you for choosing me, for choosing this, for being brave enough to accept everything you are and everything we can be together. Thank you for finding me," Ilara whispered back, "for protecting me, for believing I was worth saving when I did not believe it myself." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, king and queen, mates and partners, two wolves who had found each other against impossible odds and built something stronger than either could have created alone. And in the morning, when they woke, to face their first day as official rulers, they did so together, ready for whatever challenges awaited, secure in the knowledge that some bonds were strong enough to transform not just individuals, but entire kingdoms. Outside their window, the sun rose over mountains that had witnessed the fall of the Nightshade line 2 centuries ago. But now they witnessed its return, reborn in a queen who had once been banished, and a king who had recognized her worth before anyone else could. The future was uncertain. Politics would be complicated. Enemies would emerge. But Ilara faced it all with her wolf finally awake, her mate by her side, and the absolute certainty that she was exactly who she was meant to be, exactly where she belonged.